Hello and welcome to the Frog of Lore podcast. My name's Jason.
Hey, this is Jim.
And this is Dustin.
And in this, our 5th episode, we're going to talk about character jacks, character beast, and do a little catching up on just what's happening since our last episode. Dustin, what do you think about the new character jacks that they've announced for Mark IV and your experiences in the past? Anything you might want to talk about with that, with character jacks or beasts?
I've been waiting for them to announce character jacks for Mark IV since Mark IV was announced, because I've developed a love for some of them, playing Fior's Hand of Judgment and Sorce's Beast 09 mostly. But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, to get that on the Primecast, and it's like, oh, character jacks are coming this summer, and they're going to go with the fiction, and they're going to level up during the fiction. It's just like, wait, what? And then they released the pictures of the character jacks, and they're all amazing. I think the Dusk's Israfil hits a little less hard than Metavica or Moloch, but I cannot wait until the character jacks are in Mark IV. They look amazing, and even the ones that in Mark III or are currently in Mark IV that just seemed like smaller upgraded of the regular jacks like Triumph and the Blessing of Vengeance, they have a huge impact on the game if used right. But then you have the really unique ones like Hand of Judgment and the Fire of Salvation, which I didn't used to like the idea of paying extra points for. I know this one is one that Jem's always wanted to get in play, but I've had Megalith on the table, and he was a lot of fun, especially, granted, I played him with Bradigus and not Balder, but he still had that little bit of boost compared to the standard heavy wold that is normally ran there. So I got to say that Metavica is probably my favorite, with Moloch right behind. What do you think about them, Jim?
Well, for me in Mark IV, the only one I'm playing is Kador, and I can't be more excited about the Mother Bear. I saw the art for it and instantly knew I'd be buying the upgrade kit. And I've been trying to figure out if I should paint a different body specifically just to keep it in the Mother Bear all the time. I also was extremely happy to hear about the narrative campaign. I know you and I have talked about trying to do something like that on our own. And so to have it an official one from PP is awesome. I can't wait to see what that ends up turning out to be. And because of that, I'm hurrying up trying to get my Mark IV painted currently, but I had to strip it all down because I didn't care for the paint scheme I'd originally chosen. So now after seeing the character sculpts and the paint job on that, that's kind of what I'm going for, is the studio scheme. How about you, Jason?
For me, I think my favorite from the look of it has got to be Moloch, and I'm obviously a bit biased, as Orgoth is going to be my first Mark IV faction. Metavica is really sweet looking, but Donna plays Kador, so I've got to go up against that. It's sweet. I like to look at it, but I'm not going to enjoy playing against it. I'm sure. I have no idea what the POW is going to be on those massive claws, but I'm sure it's going to hurt when she rolls against me. All of them I really like. In being a Dusk player, I like the look of Israfil. Since we had that whole discussion on pronouncing things wrong, I'm going to make sure I say it right. What's really cool looking to me with Moloch, I love that left arm, that massive claw. That's really cool. But also the fact that the face, I know that with the Infernus tech and the Blaze, their warjacks, they've captured the spirits of beasts, and that's how they fuel their warjacks. But the face looks like the skull of a beast, like they took the skull of a beast that they captured the spirit of, and they use that in building the warjack, which adds this whole different aesthetic that's so sweet. Another thing is how I've always appreciated the depth of the little things in the lore. I saw on Reddit that a player from Russia said, yeah, Metavica translates to female bear or mother bear. Moloch sort of has like these Old Testament biblical vibe to it. And also on that Reddit thread, there was someone who was talking about Israfil. There's an angel in the Islamic text that blows the trumpet that sounds the end of time. And that's fitting considering Dusk and what's happened in the lore and the timeline with Rhett. So it's really cool, those little bits of details that they put in the names or in the names, but also the look and the design of the character jacks. I think it adds a lot to it.
Well, one thing you mentioned about Moloch having a biblical sense, Moloch is actually one of the Canaanite deities that regularly got children's sacrifices to. So it kind of fits for the Orgoth. Sacrifices for their souls, for the Felgoth.
Oh yeah. Knowing that now, that makes so much sense because when you and I were talking the other day in the chat about scoring objectives for coming up with custom scenarios and one of them being Orgoth, and we are talking about, well, the Orgoth warcasters have two primary, I guess, goals or objectives in their lives. And one is the more souls that they can capture to offer up to build their own power with the Infernals, and then the other being the political push and pull between the different leaders amongst the Orgoth as they're fighting to move up inside their society. So they're fighting for a better place in the temporary immortality, I guess you would say, and what they'll gain in the afterlife. But they're also fighting for political power and position in their mortal lives. So knowing that about Moloch, that makes a lot of sense and kind of adds a little bit of extra flavor to it.
So speaking of the lore and all that, with these new character beasts and Jax, what are your guys' thoughts as far as how the bonding is going to take place? Because it says it's able to be adjusted or changed one way or the other.
Well, initially, when it had mentioned them having bonds and other customizable options within the app. So I was under the impression, and I mean, could obviously be wrong, but because there's not a set character as of right now that is assigned to these warjacks, that they could potentially be this is the bond for Boris, this is the bond for the other, Warcaster C and A and B, and so that you could actually have the same character jack for all three or two of them. Or I'm really curious to see how they end up working it, but the wording that they used was bonds with an S and other customizable options.
See, that's interesting. I was thinking sort of along those lines, but with a tweak, and that was, if I'm not mistaken, they said as the narrative campaign goes, you're going to have other upgrade kits for different character jacks. And I was thinking that, okay, so Moloch will be bonded with maybe Horus, and then the next Orgoth character jack will be bonded with Kishtar or something like that. I was thinking that the individual kits that come out, so the first one will be bonded with just this one, and then later it'll be bonded with this other just one. Am I understanding what you're saying, that one character jack can bond with multiple casters, but depending on so Moloch, for instance, could bond with all three casters, but depending on which one he's bonded with, he has a different ability. Is that what you're saying, Dustin?
That's kind of how I read into it from what they were saying. But I also was under the impression, or maybe it was just a hope, that it sounded like those customizational options could have also been different weapon loadouts, and that maybe we just got a sneak peek at one option for these character jacks.
Right.
Well, and you could both be right. It could be the same thing where being magnetized, we could see multiple kits come out, and each one could have different bonds depending on who you take it with.
Yeah, and honestly, it wouldn't affect my enjoyment one way or the other, just having them and being able to use a character jack and get that little bonus, and more than just the bonus in game, but really the fun of the lore and the fun of how it ties in. We got Blessing of Vengeance probably a few months after we got Severius, but at the time I'd already had a Revenger painted up, and I didn't really appreciate what it would mean to get Blessing of Vengeance painted up and on the table. I wasn't looking at that, well, it's just a little extra thing you get, but a Revenger's a Revenger is what I was thinking in my head. But
that's how I approached my Blessing of Vengeance too, so I could definitely get that.
Then a little later on, I read Gallus, the novel by Oren Gray, which is primarily about Tristan, but it's got Blessing of Vengeance in it. It's got Severius in it. And when I read that and read about the connection that they had, and just reading about things that they went through in this particular battle, and I'm kicking myself going, man, that would be so fun to have him on the table. So I'm painting my Orgoth now, but as soon as I get a recon 30-point list of my Orgoth painted up, I'm definitely going to get Blessing of Vengeance painted up, because when we bring our protectorate into play right now. Severius is our caster.
I will say that I was pulling up the app to look at Fire of Salvation. I was going to say something about him, but I got distracted and I lost what I was going to say because the app just got updated with Chapter 3 of the fiction. So
Oh, wow. I know what I'm doing when we hang up then.
yeah, anyway.
We've all been enjoying the lore, but Dustin's really been getting a kick out of it and how it's motivating some of the stuff he's doing in the scenarios and the table design and stuff.
Yeah, I've been getting really big into the story as well. I was painting up all my mercs, trying to get those armies completed. But once I read chapters 1 and 2 of the new lore, I couldn't help it. I started painting up my Khador. I want to get it going. I want to get some time in before my army box arrives, hopefully. I just can't wait for this new lore to come to fruition. And then also to see what they're going to do with the warlock side of the factions and see what kind of lore they bring to the table as well.
I know I've recently gotten inspired to paint again and almost have all of my Signor stuff painted up out of nowhere in the last 2 weeks. But with the fiction dropping, my wheels have been turning and projects have been planned, and some of them are more secretive than others, but I know I've hinted at somewhere on Facebook that I was planning on doing something with the fiction and using the models that I'm getting. But yeah, I'm trying to paint up everything so I can get that going.
Yeah, it's been several weeks since we've had a chance to get games in due to some illnesses and family events and birthdays and all that stuff. But hopefully soon we'll get back in the swing of things.
But it's good in the meantime. It sounds like you're both getting some good hobby time in and getting things ready for when you do get back to the table.
Oh, definitely. This next game that we play might be the first time I have a fully painted army ever in any game, as long as I don't change my list up any.
And that's with the new Signor that you got. Is that right?
This is still the first army Signor, but it's a 30, 50, and 75 point list for 3 different warcasters. So it's like 35 different models or something. So kind of went overboard with how many I was painting at a time.
But then that gives you guys a lot of options for, we've only got a short period of time this Saturday afternoon, so let's run a 30-point game, or we've got all evening, let's run a 75-point game. So that's really cool. Donna and I, we generally would just go straight 50-point list to start, and then we'd add something in and add something in, and pretty much just play 50 points and just rotate stuff in and out. But recently it dawned on me, there's a 30-point size that we can play. So to take a little of the strain off of trying to get everything together for my Orgoth and her Khador, she got her list together she wants. I got my list together, but I do all the building and painting. She has no desire to do that because of her eyesight. So I'm getting those ready. And we're thinking that like on Tuesday night, sometimes we'll have our grandson who's 2 months old, and you can play games when you have him here because he'll be sleeping for a few hours or whatever. But it's a work night. So having that extra, it's one of the few work nights where we don't train or teach at the gym. And having that extra responsibility, having him here, we don't want to play a bigger game. So a 30-point recon game is going to be perfect. We think that's going to fill in, give us an extra game a week where we're getting like our 50-point game on Saturday evening, Saturday afternoon, and then Tuesday evening after work, we're getting a 30-point game in.
We've pretty much been focusing on 75. That's just because at the end of Mark 3, we were getting into the bigger armies, so we just kind of stayed at that point level. I have all but 2 units of my Soldiers of Fortune painted up and ready to go, but then they dropped the Italian charter, and now I'm torn. I keep trying to paint one army and then another, and then now the Mark IV Khador, so I'm all over the place. But I was really enjoying the Mercs and how they were going, so I may still try to make sure those get finished before I get too deep into the Khador army box.
I got Lord Rockbottom painted from my Italian charter. It was at the end of Mark III. I was painting them up, and I'd started on one of the jacks. And then when Mark IV was announced and we started kind of working more on like getting some Tharn for her together, getting some Banes for me together. And I want to go back because I realized recently most of the color schemes I paint are really desaturated. Even if I start with a vibrant color, I wind up just deadening down the vibrancy of it. And I don't dislike that. I think in some cases it fits. But with the Italian charter, the green I had really popped, and it's so vibrant and such a pure green. Sure, there's some desaturation in the extreme highlights and extreme shadow, but the mid-tone green really that dominates is so different and striking compared to the desaturated blues and purples and oranges that we use for our other factions. So there's a part of me that really wants to get those painted up just because it's fun to do something different color-wise as a painter, to kind of explore having some fun with a more vibrant, bright color.
I'm right there with you on exploring new colors. That was the part I'm enjoying about my mercs is it's a hodgepodge faction, so I'm making sure they're all different colors. Some of them are very, very rusty, some not as much. Some have, the Mariners have seaweed on them. I just finished my second Mariner for the Italian, and then I had to order a third, so now I got to paint again another Mariner, but I'm totally fine with that. It's just been a blast trying to do random colors and bits and not having to feel like I have to stick to 2 or 3 colors like my other factions. And then the rust effects have been really interesting too. I've been learning a lot trying to understand that, where to put it, what little subtle techniques give you a big impact on the visuals. It's been a good time.
I haven't dipped my toes into any rust effects or anything like that yet. I haven't felt confident enough in my painting to really get that deep into textures, but I did see a P3 Painters. It's on Privateer's YouTube channel. They've got some older painting videos, and there's one where they paint rust, but without any special enamels or anything, like just with regular acrylic paints. Just understanding, I think you mentioned this in the group chat, what you were exploring, Jim, and that's the idea of thinking about where water would pool up on it, where it might rust, or water would drip off the edge and things like that. And it was really cool. I geek out on the science of stuff like that, of understanding where a texture would be, even when, like if I'm painting fabric or my experiments with NMM. So with rust, I haven't really played into it, but just I remember him mentioning that and thinking about how you'd have to think about where you would put it based on where water would pool up on a particular type of surface.
I've actually been debating doing some rust effect on my Orgoth, since they're the Sea Raiders and have been at sea, and water and salt and everything is in the air and everything, that it makes sense for them to not be these pristine, clean steel or iron machines, that they would have rust or some other effects weathering them down, in that process of coming back this direction. Plus they have that feral wildness aesthetic to them that I don't think having a clean paint job really lends to them very well.
Man, that's a good point about the salt water, and especially because how far we don't know how far they had to travel to get there, so there'd be some wear and tear. And you're making me feel better because I mentioned this in the group chat about how when I look at my horror, I'd pick out little things I didn't like, and one of the things was the gold. Gold NMM has been kind of like that's been the thing I've been fighting for the last 6 or 8 months, and I'm learning, but I don't quite feel like I've got it. One of the things is that, for lack of a better word, it looks kind of tarnished on Horus armor. And hearing you say that, it makes me look at it and go, well, maybe it's not so awful. Maybe it's one of those Bob Ross happy accidents where I wound up getting the tarnished gold that he would actually have. I just didn't mean to do it.
So it wouldn't be the Frogs of Lore without bringing up some lore in every episode. So recently, the new lore's come out, and it was great. I recommend everybody take a few minutes, read it through. But it was really well written, and it was great seeing them get into the head of the Warcaster and kind of explaining what they go through as they're running their jacks. And some of the neat things that we noticed were they actually name the jacks. And so this could potentially lead to them being true character jacks. It could just end up being something that's left in the wayside eventually, but it was neat to see that little bit of intimacy of each jack had a name to it. It wasn't just, oh, I took 2 Dusk Wolves and that was it. It had character to it. It added to the story, added a little bit of weight to it, and you actually felt something for these jacks as you read the story, as well as the Warcaster and the trials they go through trying to operate the jack.
Yeah, that's something that really grabbed me. And I talked about it a little bit on Facebook. I'm an Orgoth player, and I won't spoil anything in the lore for anybody who might listen to this who hasn't read it yet, but just the names. For Ilari to have named Hammer and Nail, and I find myself, when you're reading about them, I'm rooting for them against the Orgoth that I play. Like, what is wrong with me? And it just goes to show just how engaging the story is and how much it drew me in. And while, yes, the story's well written, he really adds so much character and personality. There's times where Laurie has to really draw a Jack into doing or not doing something that goes against its nature. And it's really fantastic to see that and how it pulls it in. It goes back to what we were talking about a couple episodes ago about how we essentially role play in our games of Warmachine. And reading that, the synapses just started firing with ideas and things of how it might play out when Don and I are playing it.
It definitely gave them a lot of personality that I had never really associated with these machines. It made them more than just machines, like you were saying. But I will say, as a parent, and I'm sure both of you guys can relate, those times you tell your kids, don't name that random animal, or don't name that animal that we're raising for food because you're gonna get too attached to it. I can only imagine Alari's superiors are just face palming at that. You named your Warjacks. Why did you name them?
And that's the thing. Again, this isn't a major spoiler, but there's later on where he's talking to the mechanic. He asks about what I'm going to use as the name, and the chief is like, "Who? What are you talking about?" And he realizes, "Oh, I've known this Jack for the last so many days in these battles as Hammer or as Nail, and I haven't told anyone else, so they don't even know about that."
And the interesting thing was is in the story he talks about how he didn't come up with the names. They just were there and it felt right. And so he went with it. It wasn't like he sat down and thought, well, what should I call this Jack and what should I call that one? It was the cortexes themselves kind of lending him those names to call them by.
Right. It was natural. It just came out of his bond with them.
Which ultimately just really gave a lot of flavor and extra topping to the fiction that was being written, and seeing into the life of the Warcaster, which was something that this is probably the first actual fiction that I've read so far, but I'm gonna be spiraling through all of it here before too long. Most of my lore knowledge is through Gem or Jason or through wikis, but seeing how it's written, how Warcasters interact with their jacks and the strain it puts on them and how they control their jacks, it was really neat to read that. And with my overactive imagination, like I'm sitting there, looking at my list and like, wow, that's what that goes through. Okay.
Yeah, it's fascinating when you really read into, because there's a part where one of his jacks takes a hit and it says Laurie felt something not quite pain. So his mind was racked with something, but it wasn't the same as if he himself would have been shot, but he did feel that negative impact of something from a jack that could have been 20 feet from him.
Another great thing I noticed was they were introducing game mechanics into the lore. For instance, one of the jacks he mentions he could have had him shoot, but he was afraid that they would miss. So instead, he went into his mind and controlled the shot, which is just like allocating focus to boost your dice roll. But they put it into a way where it made sense in the lore versus just saying he made him shoot more accurately.
Right. That little thematic flavor adds so much. And as somebody who tries to make narrative bat reps, and I certainly don't put myself anywhere on the level of the people that professionally write lore, but I try to study their work and I try to do things. Little things like that are just, they really grab me, and it's such a learning experience for someone who's an aspiring, not a writer on that level, but like I said, the stuff I do for fun, I want it to be good. I want it to make sense. And so it gives me ideas. I think we talked about like how when I'm doing things in the bat reps, if it's protectorate, then I don't say Severius allocated. He blessed one of his jacks, or if he's casting a spell, he's praying a benediction over that unit or that solo or whoever it is.
Definitely gives a bit of flavor to the actual narrative, which always, I mean, in my opinion, has set your bat reps apart from others that I've watched, which, to be fair, there aren't a lot of them, but yours is the only one that's actually narrative. And I've come to enjoy those little snippets, although we need to see Fred again. I will say that.
Well, my scorn's on the shelf for right now, but Fred will return eventually.
You could always just have Fred scouting the area. You don't need a whole Scorn army. Just have him randomly make an appearance.
Well, I've definitely been having some fun with some ideas of different things in my videos. the funny thing is, when I first started making videos, I was looking at a few things. One was Wargamer Girl, and I love the production of her videos, the camera angles, different angles showing different action, and the music and all of that. And so one of the first things I did was I started looking into the music, and I found the composer. So I wound up bought his entire catalog, which was, I think zipped up, it's like 7 gigs. So unzipped, I don't know because I haven't unzipped at all. I just find the songs I want that I think fit a faction. I pull them out and I try to use, different camera angles and all. And that was my initial goal. And as I started doing, look, my personality, I'm a total goofball. I'm just a dummy, and I love to have fun. I love to laugh. And so I guess over the last few, my personality started to seep into the bat reps. And how many times do I tell you guys in the group chat, everyone's going to hate this next bat rep? I did something that was so dumb, but it made me giggle. And so I left it in. And so I've got some ideas for some things, some cameos for some different models and things in some future bat reps. They'll be short, they'll be quick. People may hate them, I don't know, but they made me laugh just thinking about it. And some of the stuff we talked about in private, something Dustin mentioned about a picture that Jim posted in the group chat that I went, okay, I'm saving that. I'll give you credit, but I'm using that in a bat rep, and it's going to be totally ridiculous. It's going to be so dumb, but I'm laughing just thinking about it. So with that, Fred can definitely make an appearance without having a full Scorn army in a bat rep.
Well, guys, it's been a good chat, but I've got a book to read with this 3rd chapter of the lore coming out, so I think it's about time to wrap it up.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody listening and supporting us and following us on everything. And I think I'm going to be reading that 3rd chapter too.
Yeah, my plans for tonight were to get back into painting my Orgoth battle group, but I'm definitely going to pull the tablet out before bed and get into reading the 3rd chapter.
All right, guys, as always, we appreciate all your support. All the comments are always welcome. And we're going to get out of here and read that chapter, and we'll see you in the next episode.